But just think, it had been called repeal the Fourth Amendment. How many people would have voted for it? Yeah. So when the time comes when we have a new administration and we are going to change these problems, we shouldn't call it repeal the Patriot Act. We should call it restore the Fourth Amendment to the American people. Right. Too often we've been rather careless with our civil liberties, but today, I tell you what, more and more people are recognizing this. I just hope it is not too late, because you have to have your liberties protected. We have to understand where our rights come from. We have to have due process, and we all have to be treated equally in the courts. And those are the goals that the founders had, and they did their very best. But you know, many of them warned us. They said, you know, we did our best on the document. It probably isn't perfect. We gave you a republic. We don't like democracy, but we'll warn you to the effect that says that if the people don't remain moral and only send moral people to Washington, the document won't save us. It'll be ignored, and I'm afraid that's where we are today.
That's right.
But there is a lot that we can do. We can do it because right now it's being recognized. Like I said about the Federal Reserve, it is recognized for the first time in 100 years that the Federal Reserve is part of the problem. They are not the solution. And also the foreign policy of Woodrow Wilson and almost all the presidents since, has failed. It's not part of the Constitution for us to be the occupiers and the enforcers and the policemen of the world and to change countries, to get involved in civil wars. That is not part of our Constitution. Not only is it not constitutional, in many ways it's very immoral, and in many, many ways it's very impractical.
Yeah.
One of the recent debates, this subject came up, and I made a suggestion. The immediate reaction wasn't all that favorable. I said, why don't we think about foreign policy sort of like a golden rule?
Yeah!
The big problem was I barely got to the word rule. I said golden. They knew what I was going to say, and guess what? The reaction was not the kind of reaction we got here. Because, I mean, this whole idea that you can boo the golden rule is pretty amazing to me. But can you imagine what the world would be like if we would never do anything to another country that we would not have them do to us? Can you imagine how much better off we would be? That would be good, and the practical thing is we would have less enemies and we would be a lot richer, we would have a lot more wealth. In these last 10 years, we would have 8,500 Americans still alive, because when you add up both wars and if you add up the contractors, 8,500 at least Americans that died. But what about the tragedies of the 44,000 Americans who've come back that have lost limbs, who are blind and have brain injuries? What a tragedy. And also, there's literally hundreds of thousands of veterans today that are looking for help. They have been, just because of the trauma and the difficulty accepting post-traumatic stress syndrome, there are now many thousands, hundreds of thousands looking for help. And this is a result. Now, if this was a desperate struggle because we had been invaded and all of us are fighting for our freedoms, it'd be a little bit different. But we're going around the world looking for fights. We don't need that. The fights ever since World War II have not been very productive and wrong. Simple little thing in the Constitution which would have solved and prevented these problems. Like, don't go to war unless the Congress declares war.
Right, yeah!
It is very clear in the Constitution that we have a strong national defense. It's not the responsibility of the states. The president is the commander-in-chief. But short of that, it falls on the Congress. You know, diplomacy and all, the Senate is involved, the money all comes out of the Congress, so there's a lot of responsibility on the Congress and on the people. But if we declare a war, as we did, just think of how World War II, less than 4 years, we were able to fight both Japan and Germany and get it over because there was a declaration of war, they knew who the enemy was, they knew what the purpose was, we fought, we won, and we came home. Then they invented a super government. You know, we all who believe that government should be local, of course the most local important government is self-government and family government. That would be good government.
Right.
Local community government and state government, that was intended, and the founders deferred to the states. But what about this super government that came out of World War II? A super government that I don't like. Matter of fact, I've introduced a bill every year to get out of that super government called the United Nations.
Yeah!
But shortly after World War II, our president went to war, not with a declaration. We went into Korea under the UN banner. Our current president went into Libya under a NATO agreement and a UN resolution. And guess what? What's going on in Libya? What's going on in Egypt? After $50 billion that we gave to Egypt to bribe them to be good people, $50 billion, those systems have broken down. And guess what? Al-Qaeda is coming in. Matter of fact, there are so many people in Washington so anxious to get into Syria. And yet, right now, even our own government, our own administration is saying, oh, we've got to be careful because we see that Al-Qaeda are coming into Syria. Guess where they're coming from? They're coming from Iraq. Iraq, they had no Al-Qaeda before the war. Now there's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they're coming over and interfering with Syria, and we're fighting on their side. It makes no sense. Non-intervention, defend this country. National security should be defended here, not just The good part is that the country is changing. They're aware of the problems more than ever before. Don't go by what you hear on the evening news, and don't by what you hear out of Washington. Washington's usually about 5 to 10 years behind the people. But we need to speed them up. We need to speed things up. The idea of liberty has been around a lot. The best experiment with the ideas of liberty, of course, was our history. We became the wealthiest and the most prosperous country ever. And now we're the country that has the biggest debt ever. Our middle class used to be the biggest and the wealthiest. It's now shrinking. And it's also poorer than ever before. Now we have a system of government designed originally to protect the individuals and make sure the middle class would be large and prosperous. But now we have a system that protects the special interests. The monetary system, whether it's the Federal Reserve or what the Congress does. Crisis comes, we have to bail them out or there'll be a depression. So the big money goes to the people too big to fail. Not only domestically, but during this bailout a few years ago, the Federal Reserve actually turned $15 trillion, half of it to overseas entities, overseas governments and banks. And our chairman of the Federal Reserve Board has assured Europe, because our banks are intertwined with the banks of Europe, and they're in hot because they bought all this debt from Greece and Spain and Portugal and Italy, that they're under the gun. So he says we have to help out, we have to take care of them, we don't want to have a depression. But I tell you what, the people who made all the money when the boom times were here and they got into trouble, they deserve the depression.
They should have gone bankrupt, but instead what happened, we went in and bailed them out, and now the people own that debt. So that is the reason that the special interests are now very much in control. So this all has to be reversed. But the experiment we have is something that we have to renew. And a lot of times we get criticized for saying, oh, you want to go back to the gold standard. You want to go back to the 19th century with all this individual liberty business. But you know what? What they're talking about is going back to an ancient tradition. What we have in Washington is going back to the days of the tyrants. Tyranny has been around for thousands of years. Most of the world has always lived under tyranny. Even in today's world, most of the world has lived under tyranny. That is what we have to stop. We don't need to go in that direction.
Right.
The stronger a government is, the more they will take control of the money. That is what they have done. And we are moving to tyranny. We have the undermining our civil liberties, the total control of the economy, the bailout of the rich, the dumping on the middle class, and dumping on the poor. So what we need to do is restore confidence in ourselves, restore an understanding about liberty. The experiment was great. It is not complex. And it's not like we have to invent something new. But we can build on what we had. We don't have to go back to a static system that we had before. There's actually a lot better ideas about monetary systems than we even had under our gold standard. So there's always an improvement. That's what we have to do. We have to advance the cause of liberty. And that is what is available to us. There's wonderful things going on in the country because I've traveled around the country and talked to a lot of people, and there's two groups of people who are coming together. There's been many who have clung to the ideas of liberty. They knew what it was like, but they became disenfranchised and disillusioned and sort of lost interest in politics, or would try to pick the lesser of two evils, and it was on and no enthusiasm. Well, right now that group is coming alive again because they remember a day, and they remember and they know their history, that a free society is much better than one that's run by tyrants. But there's also a new generation, a young generation now is coming alive because they're fascinated with this. They're fascinated with monetary policy. They're fascinated with the concept of liberty. They're fascinated and sick and tired of what we're doing overseas, and they are coming together and they are joining us in this cause to restore liberty to America. There is no reason for us to be discouraged because I think there's a lot of room for excitement, but there's still a lot of danger. There's a lot of danger out there if we do not prevail. But the opportunity is available to us to change this. We were told by one of the founders that it never takes the majority, it takes the minority, an irate, tireless minority, who are willing to go out and start brush fires of liberty in the minds of men. And that is what has happened today. And then that minority will influence and convince the majority that it is in their best interest to opt for liberty, not opting for the government taking care of us. Governments can't take care of us. They can't make us better people. They cannot protect us from ourselves. We have to understand this individual liberty and responsibility. But what they're saying today is that we cannot continue. And this is the reason it's a tremendous opportunity. And the spirit, as long as we have a way of communicating, and right now, the best way of communicating, and unfortunately they're already wanting to undermine that, and that is the internet. This is how we can communicate and spread the message. This message is spreading now by leaps and bounds. The numbers are growing. So what we need to do is not be discouraged, to go out and participate. We have to understand the issues, and believe me, regardless
regardless of what you think you should do, if you're well educated and you know what it is and you want to offer your services, there will be a job for you, one way or the other. It may be in politics, but it could be an election coming up, a participation in an election that could change things. So this is the reason that our participation, sometimes you say, well, we can't convert the whole world. But I'll tell you what, a crowd like this can do a lot of good. And there's all kinds of things that we can do and influence. And I see a lot of opportunities for us, and I see brightness in the future as long as we prevail and as long as we know that it is liberty that we want and not dependency on government. That is what made America great.
Yeah.